Hi book lovers, welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I wanted to share some of my favorite reads that I've read so far in 2024. These are 6 books that I've been obsessing over, books that I can't stop thinking about. If you guys have read any of these, I would love to hear your thoughts. And also, if you guys want to share your own favorites of the year, I know we're only like 3 months into 2024, but if you guys have read any favorites already, please feel free to share them so I can add them to my TBR. First off, one of my absolute favorites that I instantly fell in love with when I read it this year was Bride by Hazelwood. This is Allie's very first paranormal romance. Like, she is very well known for her contemporaries, her STEM romances, but this was her very first dive into non-contemporary, and I am so here for it. She knocked it out of the park. It was like she was meant to write paranormals, and if she doesn't write more, like more paranormals or more books in this world, that would be a travesty. I love the romance here. The heroine, Misery, is so funny. She's got a very self-deprecating type of humor, but she is a vampire and she enters this marriage of convenience with a werewolf Alpha because she's trying to find her missing best friend. Her whole backstory is really interesting. It's a little complicated. Like, she's not just a vampire. There's a bit more to her character, but she is basically thrust into the werewolf world, the werewolf pack, and she has to learn to adjust. And all the while, this werewolf hero is pining after her so hard, and she has absolutely no clue. So in that aspect, the pining hero aspect, this is definitely a very classic Hazelwood romance. You can see the hero slowly becoming more and more obsessed with the heroine, and oh my gosh, the chemistry was fantastic. But one of my favorite things about this book, besides the actual romance, was that nostalgic feel. Like, it really brought me back to the 2010s paranormal romance era, the whole era of J.R. Ward, Janine Frost, when they were dominating the romance industry. Reading Bride made me feel like I was back in that era, back in the paranormals, vampires, werewolf era, and honestly, I truly miss it. I loved those books. So here I am praying that we get more paranormals from Hazelwood, more paranormals like this in general. It felt very fresh and fun, and I just had the best time reading Bride. Another book that I am so obsessed with is Serpentine Valentine by Giana Darling. This is another sort of first for an author that I read this year, and I loved it so much. So this is Giana Darling's very first FF romance. It's a sapphic romance. It's kind of dark academia. It's a new adult romance set at this university, and it's a Medusa retelling. And if you know the mythology of Medusa, then you know that she was sexually assaulted, and yes, one of the heroines in this book at the very beginning does get sexually assaulted by one of her professors, and no one believes her. The president of the school doesn't believe her, doesn't help her or protect her, and she becomes an outcast at the school. So Lex decides to get revenge against not only the professor who assaulted her, but also that president. And the way she goes about this is by targeting the president's daughter, who is also a classmate. As soon as I picked this book up, like as soon as I started reading, oh my goodness, I was hooked. It's dark and angsty, and this story had my emotions all over the place. Lex and her trauma absolutely wrecked me, but I was so in awe of the way that she rose herself out of her own ashes. She reinvented herself with the help of her sisters. They formed this badass girls club that goes after predators. And then her romance with Luna, who is the school's golden girl and the president's daughter. It is so good. Right from the start, they have insane chemistry. Like, sparks were flying between them. It was so addicting to read. I couldn't get enough of it. I was on the edge of my seat. Like, the whole time I was reading this, I was like, how is Lex gonna get her revenge? Will she even get her revenge now that she's falling in love with Luna? Will Luna be an innocent bystander in all of this? Or will she get hurt in the process? My mind was all over the place. And what's amazing about this romance is that it feels so much more than a romance. Giana Darling does dive deep into the assault, into the trauma, into the after effects of what happened to Lex. It's a beautiful story, even though there are dark elements to it. The love between Luna and Lex was so pure. So if you love Gianna Darling or dark romances in general, I highly recommend Serpentine Valentine. Before we get on with the rest of this video, I wanted to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video, Ava Miles, and her new release, The Paris Roommates. This is Dean's book in the Paris Roommates series, which is basically Emily in Paris meets Friends. So if you love either of those shows, definitely check this book out. Dean, our hero, is a tech venture capitalist who is struggling in love. So he goes from San Francisco to Paris to reunite with his close friends, his very unlikely group of friends, but he knows there's someone out there for him. So in comes Jacqueline, who is about to start her own business, and Dean thinks that she just might be his dream girl. They have this whirlwind romance in Paris. It's super romantic, but Dean has to decide whether he'll keep his heart closed from love or if he'll open it again for his own happily ever after. A big thank you to Ava Miles for sponsoring today's video. I'll leave a link to the Paris Roommates for you all to check it out in my description. And now back to the rest of this video. My next book, my next favorite of the year, is actually a sci-fi romance. It's an alien romance. I haven't read alien romances in quite a bit, but I picked this one up mostly on a whim because I heard it was angsty and it had grovel, and it 100% delivered. This is called Broken by the Horde King by Zoe Draven. It was my first time reading Zoe Draven, and I am now such a huge fan. I definitely need to read it more from her now. I should probably start from the beginning of the series because this is not book one, but I read it totally fine as a standalone. This is a book that has angst galore. It's a very classic unrequited love type of story where the heroine is in love with the hero, but he doesn't exactly reciprocate those feelings. He ends up hurting her instead and leaving for like a decade. I mean, he does kind of reciprocate the feelings, but they were just too young. They were best friends. They were close friends growing up. They were from the same alien village, and even though Kieran did care about Maeva so much, he had to break her heart because he knew that they couldn't be together and that he would be leaving. And then fast forward 10 years later, Kieran is like this Horde King, this powerful figure in their world, and he wants to win Maeva's heart back because even after all this time, he knew that she was always it for him. He maneuvers it so that she is forced to be around him all the time. She is now his village's new healer, and she's pretty angry about this because she doesn't want to move, she doesn't want to leave her family, and she wants nothing to do with Kieran. I love the way that Maeva was so cold to Kieran. Like, he absolutely deserved the cold shoulder. It doesn't really stop him from trying to win her back, but it does make it a little bit more difficult, and I just appreciated that it took time for their relationship to mend back together. Like, it wasn't instant. She didn't instantly forgive him. He didn't just say my bad and she took him back, and you can feel all of his regret and misery over not having Maeva in his life for the past decade. I just lived for the angst here. My heart was physically aching the entire time I was reading this one. The emotions were so strong, and the funny thing is that even though I love second chance romances, I am super picky about them, and this book had a lot of things that I normally would not really like. Like, I'm not a huge fan of unrequited love, at least not on the heroine side, but everything about this worked so perfectly well for me. The writing was great, and honestly, if you're hesitant about reading alien romances, this isn't too out there. The hero, who is the alien, because Maeva is pretty human, Kieran is still pretty human-like. He's a giant humanoid just with a very long tail. But yeah, this book was fantastic, a new favorite when it comes to my angsty reads. When I read an angsty romance, I specifically look for a book that will make my heart and chest hurt, and this one 100% did. My next latest obsession is Tastes Like Shakar by Nisha Sharma. I absolutely adore Nisha Sharma, and this is one of her newest releases. It's book 2 in the If Shakespeare Were an Auntie series, which is like a South Asian retelling of different Shakespeare stories. This one is Much Ado About Nothing. It's like a wedding romance with enemies to lovers. The heroine is the bride's best friend, and the hero is the groom's best friend, and they are paired up together to work on their wedding, even though they don't get along. The interesting thing about this is that the main characters, when they first met, they actually had some great chemistry together. They were into each other, but then Bobby overheard something that Benjamin said about her, so now she hates him. But we have some delicious forced proximity here because of their best friend's wedding, and also someone is apparently trying to sabotage the wedding, so they're trying to track that down. I adore this one because there's so much great banter. I love the main characters, but Bobby, the heroine, was my absolute favorite thing about this book. I have a total girl crush on her. She is so feisty, so strong. I just loved everything about her. I loved how she didn't take anyone's shit, especially not Benjamin. This woman has been through a lot. She grew up curvy and plus size, and she was looked down on because of her weight. But now as an adult, she's learned to love herself, appreciate everything about herself, not give a crap about her weight or what anyone thinks of her. She is a queen. The romance was also good too, I promise. I had a great time reading this one. I appreciated the slow, natural progression of the romance, of them spending all this time together and realizing that there's a lot more to the other person than they thought. There's a lot of family drama, wedding drama, of course. It was just a very well-rounded read. I was never bored. It was just genuinely so entertaining. Okay, I realized after I finished filming this whole video that I forgot to mention one of the 6 books. I don't know how I forgot, but here I am inserting this clip after I've already started editing. But book number 5, my 5th favorite read of the year so far, is God of Fury by Rina. This is book 5 in the Legacy of God series, and honestly, it's really the only one that's worth reading, at least of the books that I read so far. It's the one romance in the series. It's set in college, it's new adult, and it's dark. It's got mafia stuff. But I adored the main characters so much. Nikolai especially. I love myself a good psychopath hero, and Nikolai is the most golden retriever energy psychopath that I've come across. He's the one who is hell-bent into starting something with Brandon, who is a total sweetheart of a guy. He's like the one good guy in the series, honestly. Like, he has an actual good, pure heart. Unfortunately though, Brandon thinks that he is straight, so when Nikolai comes onto him, he's a little bit confused and very much turned on. So Nikolai kind of starts becoming Brandon's stalker. Like, he is determined to be in Brandon's life. He's a very sweet menace, but still a menace. The romance here is very character driven. There's not much of a plot to it. Like, nothing else happens outside of this romance. So if you're a fan of those kinds of stories, like character driven plots, you'll definitely enjoy God of Fury. Honestly, I love the romance enough. I love the characters enough that I didn't mind that there wasn't much of a plot. Nikolai though, he is so ridiculous, but I just love the way he loves Brandon in his crazy way. He would move heaven and earth for him, and the ending here was so perfect. I don't think I've ever come across like a meet the parents scene in a book that I loved as much as the one here. It was hilarious and heartwarming. So yeah, almost forgot to include this book, but I made it. And then my final book for this video is actually not a romance. I read a non-romance. I know, surprise, surprise. It's a historical romance that was actually pretty popular back in the day. I just never read it until now. It's The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. So this book is historical fiction. It is set in World War II, and I knew going in, because it was World War II, that it would get to me, and yeah, I ended up crying quite a bit over this book. I actually recorded myself. I'll probably put the clip in here. It is so funny looking back at it. Oh my god. I'm reading The Nightingale. The final chapter is killing me. I'm dying. Oh my god. If you know me, you probably know that I rarely ever cry over books. I can cry for anything else, but books, it just takes a lot to make me tear up and cry and sob, but I did all of that for The Nightingale. This book wrecked me, and I knew 100% going into it that I would. It's a story about two sisters set in France. The older one is married with a daughter. The younger one is a bit of a rebel, and it's set right when France falls under Nazi occupation. So it is set over a period of several years from the beginning until liberation. And the story here, it took me on a journey. The writing here, the storytelling, it really made me feel like I was transported back to World War II. It's such a visceral, powerful book. I could not stop reading it. And I really loved how we have these two sister stories who are very intertwined, but they're also very different. I love the juxtaposition of the older sister who is living as a survivor. Like, she's just trying to protect herself, her family, and survive throughout everything going on. Meanwhile, the younger sister, who has always been a rebel, who has always been outspoken, she's the one who goes out and fights against the Nazis. So much happens in this book. My heart almost couldn't take it. I think halfway through the book was when I first started crying, and then I got to the end, the last few chapters, and I could not stop sobbing. They were happy tears, they were sad tears, unfair tears, what the heck tears, and oh my god tears. I truly went through the ringer when I read this one. It's not the first World War II book that I've read. It's definitely not the first World War II book that I've cried over, but this is probably the one that I've cried the hardest. I can now at least see why this book became so popular when it first came out, and I'm really glad that I read it despite all the tears. So those were 6 books that I've been obsessing over so far in 2024. A couple of them are new releases or some old ones. If you haven't read these yet, please add them to your TBR. I promise you will not be disappointed by them. I love all of them so much. As always, links to all the books that I mentioned will be down in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!